Ladies and gentlemen, the crowd favorite from South Florida, Mark Winning Picks Lawrence. And now, let's get it on!
Against the spread, Winning Picks with Mark Lawrence.
Welcome back, everybody. Once again, this is Mark Lawrence, and we're all set to go against the spread. It's a big show we've got on tap for you today. We're going to preview the entire group of 5 conferences. We're going to cram it in a little bit. We got a little bit of a jamming to do here, but we're going to preview all of the group of 5 conferences on this show today. Our good friend Jim Feist is on hiatus. Jim will be joining us in a couple of weeks. We're going to wish him well. He's got a little bit of a visit to a doctor back in Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown, and I hope everything works out well for Jim. But on the show here today, we're going to preview, as I mentioned, this group of 5 conferences that we're going to be doing here. Before I get to that, let me get a little bit of homework out of the way here because there's a lot of stuff going on here right now at ProLine TV. We're going to be having that Beat the Pros contest coming up. We're going to talk about that once it's formulated here. But simply put, if you become a member here on the site at ProLine TV, you'll be able to participate in Beat the Pros. You'll go up against Andy, Greg, Jim, Victor, Beat the Pros in much of a Wise Guys contest style format. So stay tuned for information about that coming down the road. We've got terrific interviews coming up here. Greg DePalma's just knocking it out of the park with all of his interviews that he's been doing, in-depth college football previews. Monday, it was Josh Furlong. He did the Utah Utes. Tuesday, the Iowa Hawkeyes with Tom Kakert. Then Wednesday, which is the day we're broadcasting today, Miami of Florida with Gary Furman. Next week, mark this down, on Monday, Greg's going to dip into the Georgia Bulldogs inside the SEC with Jed May and talk about, he's a recruiting expert for USA Sports. Also, on Wednesday next week, Rob Mosley, editor from GoDucks.com, is going to talk about the Oregon Ducks. NFL, you want some NFL this week? How about this? Greg is working overtime. Wednesday, the New York Jets with Matt O'Leary. Friday, Carolina Panthers with Rashard Beard and David Rhodes. Next week, mark this down, on Tuesday, Minnesota Vikings with Adam Patrick. Wednesday, the Atlanta Falcons with Kevin Knight. It just goes on and on and on. All you need to do is stay programmed here at ProLine TV. You're going to pick up all your early preseason information, everything you're going to need to know and get an edge like you've never seen before, just tuning in to all these interviews that Greg is doing here. I also want to thank everybody for tuning into the show. And if you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button down below. It means a lot to us if you do just that. Hit the like button while you're down there. And why not ring the bell while you're there as well? And we'll keep you in tune with everything it is that we're doing here on Against the Spread on the ProLine TV platform. With that, let me welcome into the show Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. Andy, I'm heading out your way in about 2 weeks. Do I need to bring suntan lotion, or will I be able to have to stay inside and just avoid it all?
Probably suntan lotion, sunglasses. You probably you won't even need a light sweater for at night when the lows get down into the low 80s, perhaps. Might they'd like to bring some bottled water or have some at hand all the time, because our temperatures routinely will be in the vicinity of 105 to 113 for the daily highs. And again, every place has air conditioned and swimming pool, so you should be fine. And by the way, you talked about Greg and the various people he's interviewing. I think one of the things we may want to think about as a topic for when we start the NFL, like the top 2 or 3 most interesting teams in the NFL this coming season. And it could be for any reason that you want. For example, I was just thinking about it, and I was going to say one of the most interesting teams entering the season, Minnesota Vikings. For any number of reasons that we could talk about.
Well, we'll put that
an
on the list.
Opportunity to also get some insight into some of the wagers we can do. Yeah.
I've got an interesting team of my own, and I'm going to speculate on here, but maybe a little bit more when we drill down and do the pros, but I'm going to look long and hard at the Atlanta Falcons this football season, and I'll get into all the reasons why when we get there, when we do our NFL preview.
I believe they opened the season against each other, and I believe the line is pick 'em in that game.
There you go. Pick 'em. So whoever gets off to the win.
And I believe it's at Atlanta.
Well, that's probably a favorable line for Atlanta being at home in a pick 'em. But, I think the Minnesota quarterback situation is going to have to settle out. the Atlanta situation has settled out. It's going to be all Michael Penix Jr. for that.
By the way, just before we start with the colleges, I have to believe one of the most disrespected teams over the last 5 years in the NFL happens to be Atlanta's opening opponent, Tampa Bay. This team seemingly never gets any talk. They always they're going to win the weakest division in football, and then they go out every couple of years and win a playoff game or two.
Yeah, I think they've won, 5 straight division titles?
Yeah, something along. And that used to be the division where no team would repeat for many, many years. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think that may have been the division where the team went from last to first like several years in a row.
Yeah, no respect at all for what they've done there in Tampa. And largely because they haven't beat a whole lot. And, that's probably the weakest division in the National Football League for the last
other than the year they won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady.
Yes, other than, yes, right.
That was it.
But since he's left, they've kind of held fort, per se, if you will.
Well, keep making the playoffs, yeah.
Let's, Greg DePalma, I got to ask you how you're doing, bud. I know you've been busy, man, as I mentioned in the opening of the football season or opening of the show here. How are your days and nights going as we enter closer to the football season?
They're interchangeable, but it's fun. This is the fun time of year. This is when you prepare for the season. This is when you try to make yourself as intelligent and resourceful as possible, not just for you, but for your viewers. So that's when it's a lot of fun. And we have a lot. And I like the fact that we've been able to add to my contact list in college football. So talking to new people who I haven't spoken to before with teams like Texas and, teams, Duke. It's nice to talk about schools and programs that I haven't been able to get in touch with, like a really good guest that is either someone that I want on the program or someone that's available. So it makes it a lot more beneficial, not just, like I said, for me, but our viewers, because that's why they're watching. So yeah, it's a great time of year.
Great time of year to be here too, with all this.
By the way, excuse me, Mark, you asked, well, what things are like at this time of the year. It's kind of like the summer solstice in Alaska, 22 hours of work and 2 hours of sleep at this time of the year.
Oh, I like that ratio. 22 and 2.
No, it was 22 hours of work, not 22 hours of sleep.
Well, I'm relating
work,
to it.
lightness,
I'm kind of relating it from the magazine is what I'm relating it to.
Oh, yeah. That your summer solstice lasts from around mid-March to the end of June.
Yeah, after the Super Bowl till the beginning of June is what it is. Yeah. Exactly right. But let's get into it, guys. Let's tear apart this group of 5 that we're going to be looking at. There's 2 independents this year. Not that they matter. One of them isn't really a group of 5. It's only we're going to mention them because they happen to be an independent team, and that's Notre Dame, who fits as well as anybody does into the group of Power 4 conference football teams. Coincidentally, the opponents they're going to face this year, they own the highest percentage win percentage last season was .696. You look at all their win-loss records of Notre Dame's opponents last year.
Does that, by the way, include the postseason opponents who are going to contribute a lot to that high winning percentage?
Yes. In the preview guide, Andy, all you need to do is look over that OWL column. That means opponents win-loss.
Right.
And you just tally those up, and you'll see those numbers there. But the thing that intrigues me about Notre Dame coming into this football season here is they're balanced, 14 starters, 7 on each side of the football, and they did go backwards last year. They went from 9 wins to 13, despite the fact their offense slipped 24 yards a football game. I'm not keen on that. Their defense also went backwards 49 yards a game. You know what that means? I love to fade these teams, Andy, that improve their win-loss records and straight-up records, but go backwards straight up and against the spread. What are you seeing for an over-under win total on this team, Andy?
Okay, well, let me just make a comment. Now, Mark, I believe, if I understand correctly, your statistics that you show with those averages and everything include all postseason games, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the reason I mentioned that is Notre Dame last year, including the postseason, was 14-2. But remember, the last few games they played were against the best teams in the country, as they were in the playoff for those 3 or 4 games that they had to play. So it sort of taints the overall thought about the team going backwards last year, because part of those backward numbers may have been comparing a 16-game schedule that they played last year, 4 of which were outstanding teams at the end of the year, the elite teams that they had to face, versus let's say 12 or 13 games the year before, which did not include that many tough games at the end of the season. So that's just one thing that I keep in mind when I'm thinking about the expected regression. Because we're in a new environment now, and of course we're going to move up with even more teams this coming year as far as the playoff goes. So it's sort of like a different football, let's call it, structure than we've had in the past. So some of these things that we've thought about in years past, because I'm not so sure about Notre Dame going backwards because of that, because they may end up having to face a similar schedule. I will mention that Notre Dame has received some great support in the betting markets as far as the national championship goes. When the Westgate opened these odds, really in the latter stages of the playoff last year, January 10th of 2025, Notre Dame was listed at 18-1. They've come down to 14-1 now, which makes them, I believe, about the 8th or 9th choice overall. So they are still held in highly regard. Now, as far as their season win-loss total is concerned, and a number of places have had this one out, I usually rely on the Westgate because they've been doing it, the same staff there for many, many years, so they have a real good feel year after year as to how to put some sharp numbers together. Their total opened at 10.5 with the under 10.5 minus 140. Now, remember, these win-loss totals, regular season games only. They do not include conference championships nor any of the playoff games. So they are at they opened and remain at 10.5 with the under minus 140 and the over plus 120. Now, to cash the over ticket, it means you're looking at just one loss for Notre Dame that they can achieve. And of course, as the runner-up last year, they are going to be the target for every team they face. And I look at their schedule. Try to find teams where they might be competitive, and it's really hard. That 11-1 record looks feasible when you look at the fact they open at Miami, Florida, that is, not Ohio. Host Texas A&M, who they actually have some revenge from last year. I'm sorry, they beat them last year, 24-14. And then the rest of the schedule is very, very workable. I mean, you host USC, you host Boise State. These are good teams, but no match. So it's almost, if you think that Notre Dame will beat both Miami of Florida on August 31st, and then they have a week off before they host Texas A&M. If you think they can start 2-0, this team could go undefeated, because I really don't see, Mark, Greg as well, any other games where they could realistically be tested. The one quality opponent, and again, it's a group of 5 team. We're going to talk about Boise State, but that game's at Notre Dame.
Yeah, their schedule is all about those first 2 games. It's a fairly winnable schedule. It doesn't mean that they're not going to get a couple of teams coming in and playing them hard. I mean, USC, Boise, as you mentioned. Late in the season, though, I just don't see it. Those last 5 games, they'll probably just roll. So it's that first part of the schedule, and they do have to go to Arkansas. It's an SEC team, so there are a couple of potential pitfalls. But yeah, it looks. See, the trick is that will they split? Yeah, the averages tell you they'll split. And I think more often, but the thing is I just spoke with Gary Furman yesterday about the Hurricanes. And, I actually feel pretty confident about the Hurricanes having a big year this year. And that's going to be one awesome football game. To have those rivals go up against each other to kick off the season, it's going to be an incredible situation. But the problem for Notre Dame is they've got this freshman quarterback, CJ Carr, that's going to have to play in this monster game in his first game on the road. It's going to be tough. And then, like you said, then they have to take on a Texas A&M team who will be better than last year's team, and that comes for revenge. So it's, I tell you what, it's very possible Notre Dame could even lose the first 2, win the next 10, and then they'll be in the playoffs, but then they'll lose the win total that you're talking about, Andy.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind, again, as I mentioned, is after the Miami game, they have the next weekend off before A&M. A&M has a couple of winnable games, the first 2 games, Texas San Antonio, and I think it was at Utah or Utah State, heading into their game at Notre Dame. So they'll get their those 2 preseason games effectively for Notre Dame. So I am honestly at the price of I think I said plus 120 on the over to go 11-1. I'm giving serious consideration to playing that, because, and of course the only problem with playing an over is that what happens if your quarterback gets injured at the start of November? Okay, and we don't know what injuries are, so there's rarely a significant edge in playing the over, because the over generally says you're going to achieve what you're expected to achieve, which generally means you're going to have very few injuries throughout the course of the season. Whereas the under basically says, okay, there already aren't great expectations for them to look under. And if they have injuries, your chances for the under are even improved, unless you happen to have a situation where some guy all of a sudden rises up and shows that he should have been a 5-star recruit instead of a 3-star recruit. So I am looking at the over in that one for Notre Dame.
That's a great philosophy, Andy. I love that as well. When you're betting season over under win totals, almost always look to the unders in these games, because they'll go over. The odds maker knows exactly where the public's going to go with their wagers, and they have to play that complete healthy season to be able to do just that and then perform. And I agree with you. I'll make cases for unders 2 out of 3 times.
By the way, there's not a huge database, even going back to BCS games, how losers in the quote-unquote national championship game do the following year, because that's the situation Notre Dame is in.
Yes, they are. And, I've got that. I just don't have it handy right here, but I do keep a track in my database. I call it a set of how teams that lost football championship games do the following year. Remind me, and perhaps I'll report on that next week.
I know for a long time, teams that lose bowl games, and they've been frequent bowl participants, and they lose a bowl game and they come back the next year, or it's the one that you like to follow a lot, mission teams that made a string of bowl appearances, miss it, and come back the next year, fare fairly well in those bowl games.
Yes, they do. How about UConn, guys? Here's a football team in Connecticut that won as many games last year as they did the previous 2 years combined. They've got something going here with UConn, and it's all about Mora, their head coach, Jim L. Mora, I should say. And he's got a decent amount of returning starters coming back. 9 on the offense. He ranks number 59 overall in returning production. Greg, does this football team need a conference, or are they just good enough to be an independent team?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I hope every team would have a conference, and I think Notre Dame doesn't have one for a good reason. So whether UConn can get in one, you would think they would, because of their basketball program, and because it does look like Jim Mora is building something here with the football program. So maybe that'll get him in there. I don't know if it'll be to their advantage, because they got a pretty easy schedule. So that means that they're going to go to a bowl and they'll make a little bit more money, and they could win, who knows, maybe 9 games this year. So they got, like you said, a lot of good returning talent coming on offensively, some good transfers. So yeah, they're headed in the right direction. This was an awful program, as you know, just a couple of years ago. They were just dismal for so long. So, if I was them, I'd give Jim Mora a lifetime contract and hope that he just stays there until the time that maybe they are able to make their way to a conference. So, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Either way, UConn will have a good year, but they're not going to be any sort of special team or anything like that.
No, it's a bowl team. It looks like another bowl team.
I was going to say about UConn, another thing, because, again, there's only 2 independents, and, one is a national power, Notre Dame. UConn, as an independent, their opponents who are in conferences, this is going to be sort of like a game that, okay, we're playing UConn. It's not going to be as big a game to the opponent, like, for example, let's say Syracuse or Ball State or Florida International or Boston College, because those teams are going out of conference. So this might be an opportunity where they're going to think that, well, the game, every team wants to win every game they play. But conference games are much more important than non-conference games. Every game for UConn is going to be important, because if they want to be bowl eligibility, they're going to have to come up with 6 wins, and probably even a little bit more, because of the overall strength of the schedule, which is not all that great. I mean, I'm trying to find the toughest games, maybe Boston College, maybe Duke. So those might be the 2 toughest teams, one of which they play at home and one of which they play on the road, but both of which are non-conference games for the opponent. So I'm also enthusiastic, because I like Jim Mora. I think I had them over their win total his first year, because I thought he would make a difference. And I think, was that the year? I think they went, I think that was his first year. I believe they went 6-7, which means that they ended up losing a bowl game, I think, that for that first year. So I'm looking at UConn, which has the season win total of 7.5 plus 120 on the over. Now, if it were minus 120 on the over, I probably wouldn't be interested. But for them to go 8-4 against the schedule that they have, and the other thing to keep in mind is their last 4 games, 3 of them are at home. UAB, Duke, and Air Force, and then they end the season at Florida Atlantic. So, if they need some wins late, they've got a favorable home schedule to do so.
All right,
that
guys.
sounds like an over to me, doesn't it?
A little
Yep.
bit, yes, it does. We're going to have to step on it a little bit here, guys, because now we've got a handful of teams in conferences. And what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the conference. I'm going to more or less set the conference up. We'll talk about who's got the highest win total in the conference, who has the lowest win total, and we'll get opinions from everybody about any team in this conference that might stick out to anybody. Going over to the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, the kingpin over there is the Memphis Tigers, 9.5 wins for their season win total, plus 300 to win the conference. The guy that sits at the bottom, Temple, the Owls, I've seen anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 wins on their season win total, plus 15,000. They're never going to do that. This looks like this conference might be a two-team race, however. You got Memphis, who's we just mentioned here, and Tulane is always in the running here. Andy,
Tulane is actually Tulane and Navy, and I think UTSA, according to what we're seeing on the screen and what I have here from the Westgate, are all priced with shorter odds than Memphis. Tulane, well, okay, I'll go with what's on the screen: plus 300, Navy plus 380, and UTSA at plus 450. So they are all favored more than Memphis, but I agree that Memphis, I think, is the most talented team in the conference. I was very impressed with Tulane. I can understand why they are the preseason favorite. The coach came in after taking over from Willie Fritz, who left for Houston last year, and the win total dropped a little bit, but not as much as I think a lot of people expected last year. So I can understand the favoritism for Tulane. I agree. I do like Memphis, and UTSA has been a very nice team since they moved up from FCS a few years ago. So I'm taking a look at UTSA. I'm showing 7.5 with the over priced at about minus 135, a little bit too high, but I do think I probably prefer that one. Although, again, Mark, if you like Memphis, their win total is reasonable at 8.5 with the over at a plus price.
Well, very manageable schedule for Tulane this football season here. And I think the key thing for this team, the popularity of them, at least in the odds makers' eyes, is John Sumrall, their head coach. This guy's a winner. I mean, he comes over last year, his first year with the program, 9 wins he put in the bank, and he comes from a winning pedigree. You take a look at Memphis and what they've done here of late. You add them up, 32 wins the last 3 seasons here. They're going to be in the mix. The question is, will they win this thing? Greg, any ideas you see inside the AAC?
Well, I'm not really sold on Ryan Silverfield at Memphis. I think, look, he did a good job with bringing in the players that he brought in before, including Seth Hennigan, the quarterback. But they lost so much talent, quarterback, running back, receiver. I just think it's way too much talent. And I don't have that much faith in Silverfield that he'll be able to instantaneously get this team back to where they need to be. UTSA, though, I have more faith in Jeff Traylor. They also have a quarterback coming back. So I'd probably lean more towards UTSA than either Tulane or Memphis. Same reason with Tulane. Mensa goes to Duke. That's a really good quarterback, so he's gone. They lost their big-time running back. He's gone. I'm not saying Memphis and Tulane aren't going to be at the top of the conference. Of course they will, but I just don't. I don't see them getting any better than they were last year. I could see UTSA improving. I could also see Alex Golish getting this USF team in contention, maybe for a nice little sleeper pick, because Byron Brown, the quarterback, was a big player for them a couple years ago, got hurt last year, midseason, did not return. So he's back. I think that's big. And then taking a look at the rest, obviously you saw Navy's up there, Army, though, the thing with Army, they lose Daly at quarterback, and they also lose several key players in the offensive line. That's what made them a special team. All those guys are gone. And as far as the rest of the conference, I really don't see any other teams that really, jump out. So if I'm looking for one sleeper team, it would be South Florida.
Well, there would be a sleeper team. I'm with you with UTSA. I think, you're talking about, to me, the teams that are most well coached in groups of 5 conferences are the teams that usually win their conferences, or at least go to bigger, better bowl games. And there's not too many teams in this conference that are going to find coaches that are going to out-coach Jeff Traylor over at UTSA. He's done a great job with that program. He's won 46 games in 5 years, coming back number 2 overall in the country in returning production ranking on offense. That's pretty nice, especially when that offense was up on both sides of the ball last year. That I think it's going to be a championship game between those two teams. Andy, any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I was just mentioning on Memphis that I do like the makeup of the team. I do understand the concerns that Greg has expressed, but I think all three of us are agreed on UTSA.
Okay, let's go over now, guys, if we can, to the Conference USA. It's always been a conference that believes in quantity rather than quality, if you will, per se. They're forever bringing teams into the loop, whether it's basketball or football, and it's no different for football for this unit or this conference, I should say. And heading the list, as they have been doing most recent years, is Liberty. Even though Hugh Freeze has gone on to Auburn, they still continue to keep winning football games. I'm saying their win total at 10.5 plus 150 to win the conference. That's pretty strong. And Kennesaw.
By the way, I'm showing 9.5. If you
Okay.
want to get a different number,
Go ahead.
at Westgate, which just put their totals out the other day. I want to say just past the 27th, which would have been Sunday, so just a few days ago. 9.5 with the over under both at minus 110.
And for the low guy in the totem pole, Andy, what do you see Kennesaw State? Do you see him with the fewest win totals in this conference?
I don't have it ranked by win totals conference by conference, but they are at 3.5,
Yes.
minus 110 each way. I will say, because I could see the 9.5 for Liberty, just based upon the odds to win the conference, and there's such a discrepancy between Liberty, which is minus 120, the clear favorite, and the next price team, which is Western Kentucky, plus 350, and after that, the other teams are 10-1 or higher to win the conference. So the odds makers, as far as winning the conference championship game are concerned, Liberty and Western Kentucky are by far the two strongest teams in the conference by a significant margin. And, if I take a look at Liberty's non-conference schedule, I'm showing Maine, which is a non-conference game against an FCS opponent. That should be a fairly winnable game. They then open play at Jacksonville State, which is a conference game. And then they have non-conference games against Bowling Green and James Madison. And James Madison, of course, is still a very powerful team and showed what it could do in its first couple of years. And then the rest of their schedule is games against the game. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games of their 12 are against non-conference foes, and clearly, other than Western Kentucky, they're going to be solid favorites, I believe, to win those other 7 games. So I like them over.
A little bit of concern for me about Western Kentucky is really the lack of experience and what's coming back. Yeah. Just 5 returning starters. They rank number 123 overall in the nation. In returning production, those are not good numbers. I think somebody might elevate, move up, if you will, and take their spot as the number 2 team in the conference. Greg, any thoughts you might have about Conference USA?
Yeah, it's pretty bad and boring. This shouldn't even. I don't even think that this is like one of those conferences that's just better off FCS, to tell you the truth. I know Liberty is different. Yeah, look, the thing with with Western Kentucky that's going to be interesting is that Helton, the coach, is doing that same thing he did several years ago, where he hired an offensive coordinator from an FCS school and their big time quarterback, and brought them both to the team here in the FBS, and it did wonders for him for a couple of seasons. So. This quarterback kid, McIver, who had a really good go at it. I think it was Abilene Christian. So, so that's going to be interesting to watch. Maybe keep an eye on Middle Tennessee, because Derek Mason, he did a pretty good job at Vanderbilt.
Yes,
I know it was for a short period of time, and he's got a good quarterback returning, and it's his second year. So I'd probably, maybe if you just want to look at a couple of potential sleepers, I would look that way at Middle Tennessee. And Jacksonville State, of course, lost Rich Rod, so you think that's going to be a huge loss. There's a new coach, of course, at FIU. So we'll find out whether this Willie Simmons can do anything there. And there's also a new head coach at Sam Houston, Phil Longo, who was an offensive coordinator, big passing kind of guy that has had a lot of success, with that scheme. So But I'm sure since he's a first-time head coach, it's going to take a little while at Sam Houston. So, so I think the only thing for me is, it's probably going to be Liberty and Western Kentucky in the final. But Middle Tennessee is the one team I'm going to keep my eye on.
And to your point, Greg, Middle Tennessee's season win total is 5. The over is priced at -150, so it's a little bit expensive. But at the same time, their odds of winning the conference championship are 18-1, which puts them sort of in the lower half of the conference. You've got about 5 teams or 4 or 5 teams at or better than 18-1. So certainly that does suggest that Middle Tennessee, if indeed you are correct about what you said and that all makes sense, this is a team that should be able to get 6 wins and qualify for a bowl.
Let's go over to my neck of the woods, guys, where I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and that was the home of MAC country, Mid-American Conference country, where they were always the redheaded stepchilds to the Big Ten teams. They were getting the scraps the Big Ten didn't end up recruiting, but they came and played in MAC conference games, and they played with chips on their shoulders, and they ended up surprising and ended up being pretty good plays, if you will, from a handicap standpoint at least. But I have to say this about the MAC this year. They have been terribly stripped and are devoid of talent this year. And you can attribute that 100% exclusively to the rotten transfer portal and what's going on in the world of college football. All they're doing is using group of 5 team conferences, especially the MAC conference, as breeding grounds, like minor league teams, to recruit these players and bring them over into their big conference programs, if you will.
What it is, Mark, is that the Big Ten teams realize that they underrated some of the players that they left over for the MAC and realize their mistakes and get them as sophomores or juniors.
Well, what they are is they're seasoned, Andy. The Big Ten players lose players either to graduation or they sign for more money and go elsewhere. So they have holes to plug. And they'll go right away to the MAC. They'll look at the players that are the best players in the MAC, starting quarterback, starting anything, make them ridiculous offers, and all of a sudden they're just stripped bone naked. And you talk about the teams in this conference from a returning production standpoint. My goodness, every team in this conference ranks. There's only one team that's not 100 or worse in the nation because they've been stripped out for all of their abilities, and it's going to show up there again.
That team has to be Toledo.
Well, Toledo, yes, and Toledo is the one team in this conference that I'm still surprised Jason Candle is still at Toledo. Yeah. Just given the fact that of the nice job that he's done, all he's ever done is win since he's had this program here. And if they steal and strip players from the program, why not head coaches? Why don't they go elsewhere? He's in 9 years, he's won 73 football games, and his returning production is good. It's 34th overall in the country. So what's going to happen with Toledo this year? They're going to win the conference because they're more experienced, more depth in this team, and they're going to get stripped again. Okay. It's a vicious cycle that's going on in the world of college football. I think it's sad to see, and I'm a little PO'd, as you can tell, because it was my hometown conference there.
Well, hopefully, Mark, we heard that. I think there's a realistic chance that we're going to see this, salary cap, for a better term, happen regarding, what these schools can spend. And if that happens, then it'll be a lot harder because these teams the MAC will be able to spend just as much money as any team from the SEC. So
does the MAC have as much money to match dollar for dollar with?
Well, that's the thing,
No, but the big conferences, to Greg's point, will have to be more judicious in their spending because they won't be able to spend as freely if they've got, say, a $20 million cap versus no cap or a $40 million cap.
Yeah,
exactly.
And especially if they want to give $5 million to one player, then like a quarter of their cap could be gone.
Exactly.
Yes, it could.
Yeah. So hopefully that'll go through. And if it does, then these types of programs will definitely benefit. So.
Well, as I mentioned, Toledo, top of the pack here, favorite to win this conference here. Over under season win total for this team. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. I saw 8.5. I don't know what you're seeing there in Vegas right now as we're speaking.
I'm showing 8.5, and I'm showing the over -140. Okay. And as far as the odds to win the championship, this is almost similar to Conference USA with Liberty and then Western Kentucky and then everybody else. It's not quite the same with the MAC, other than the fact that Toledo is head and shoulders above the teams that are just behind them. Toledo +160 to win the conference. Then you've got Ohio U +400, Buffalo +450, Miami plus 700, and then double digits, 12 to 1 or higher for the rest of the conference. And you know this, Mark, Toledo has been the class of this conference going back 50 years, basically. I mean, they don't win every year, but if you take a look, I would venture to say, and maybe you have the information somewhere to get it, if you go back, let's say, to 1970 or even 1980, I've got to believe Toledo has the best overall record in that conference, probably by a significant margin of whoever is second. Maybe it's an Ohio U, especially when Frank Solich was there. Maybe it's a Miami of Ohio that's had a lot of really quality programs. But I believe that Toledo probably historically has been the better conference, and unfortunately, it's not a large enough market there for them to be considered to join a team like a conference like the Big Ten. They're not in a major market, but certainly as far as results go, that would be the kind of attractive team if it were a bigger market.
Well, as I mentioned, Jason Campbell, he's had a winning season every one of his 8 years he's been there. I don't remember the last time Toledo has had that losing season, but here's a unique situation in the conference here. There hasn't been a repeat champion. You got to go back to 2011 and 2012 to find the last time a team repeated as a champion. Last year's champion was Ohio University, the Bobcats. And I sort of think they're a little bit of a mid-rung team as far as win-loss season over or under win totals go.
7.5.
7.5, which means they'll be competitive. They should be competitive. But will it be enough to overtake Toledo, though?
Well, Toledo's only 8.5, only one more win.
Yep.
So it's not like the season win totals is projecting a huge difference between these teams. Let me see what I'm showing at Westgate, actually 7 with the over minus 120. So still preference for Toledo.
Yeah, the big advantage, like you were saying, Mark, that Toledo has, not only are they perennial, champions or co-champions, it seems like every year, but they're very experienced compared to the rest of the conference, and that especially at quarterback, and that's going to help them out. Look, Ohio brings back their quarterback. There's some offensive returning skill players coming back, but they lost a lot, including their coach. And now I think we're seeing one of those things at Ohio that we see all over the place is when the successful coach leaves and then the assistant comes in, does a great job, better than anybody expects, and then he leaves. When you go to that third guy, chances are, you're on borrowed time now. You can't keep getting lucky with one assistant, one after another that just keeps having success. So that's where Ohio is in their first year. I think Miami of Ohio was also going to take a little step back because their quarterback who was there forever. Gabbert's gone. Bowling Green's going to be interesting because Eddie George is taking over.
Yes.
So that's going to be a team to follow. And I also want to keep my eye on Western Michigan. I like Taylor, the coach there. He went out in the FCS ranks, I think it was FCS or Division II, and grabbed this really prolific quarterback who's now going to be quarterbacking his team. And I like the coach. So if I'm looking for a sleeper team in the MAC, I'd keep an eye on Western Michigan.
By the way, as far as Toledo goes, and I mentioned the 8.5 win total, their non-conference schedule, well, they have a home game against Morgan State, but they play decent teams. They're at Kentucky to open the season. Then they host Western Kentucky. And then in the middle of conference schedule, I think the game is the end of October at Washington State. So they might have a great conference record, but they could lose at Kentucky and they could lose at Washington State, and then they can only afford one more loss.
Well, guys, let's move it over to the Mountain West Conference here. We're going to go into Andy's backyard right now. Mountain West Conference, home of the UNLV Rebels, who've made a resurgence here of late. A lot of that Barry Odom was part of. He's no longer with the football program.
And I don't know, is it a reward to go to Purdue? Or is it a punishment to go to Purdue?
I can assure you the paycheck is a reward.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, for sure it is.
But the gray hairs may be the punishment.
That may well be the punishment. This is a conference here that is always competitive. The one unique thing I was talking with Andy before the show, you're talking about a team inside this conference has had 25 consecutive winning seasons in a row. The only team in college football that can say that's Boise State. All this football team does is knock out wins after winning season after winning season. If you take a look at how many points they outscore their opponents by, it's been an average of 217 points per season. They just knock people out, and they're going to be back again in that role to do it just again. Andy, I'm seeing him as a 9.5 for an over/under season win total. Would that be right?
That is correct, and this may be the most one-sided predicted winner. Boise State minus 140. second, and I'm a little bit surprised considering the lack of historical success and the fact that they're changing coaches, is our own UNLV. They currently are the second choice. So I said minus 140 on Boise, so that's an odds-on favorite, plus 600 for UNLV as the second choice in the conference. I think that's the greatest spread between team number 1 and team number 2. And then you've got a team that's been a little bit of a surprise in recent years, and that's San Jose State at plus 700. And then the rest of the conference is at double digits or higher. When I look at and Boise State, the win total is indeed 9.5 with the over, and this may go up to 10, minus 190 to play the over. I just don't think you can lay any. I don't think, if I'm going to, if it's 9.5 minus 190, I might just as well lay the minus 140 for them to win the conference.
Well, where do the 3 losses come from, Andy? That's the question.
Well, that's what I want to take a look at. But even so, look, you could have an injury, like I say. But I mean, if they're that strong of a favorite, they're probably going to be favored almost certainly in every one of their conference games. Non-conference games at USF, which is a team I know that Greg likes, but maybe not in the first game of the season because of some of these teams that come back with a lot of potential. It takes a couple of games sometimes for that potential to start being shown. And Boise, of course, has the experience, but the game is at South Florida. Then they host Eastern Washington. They have, in the middle of the season, a non-conference game against Appy State. One loss will come at Notre Dame on October 4th. They then host the second choice in the then they host New Mexico. Then they host 2 weeks later UNLV, the second choice in the conference. So their non-conference games at Notre Dame, home to Appalachian State, home to Eastern Washington. Those should be wins. At South Florida, probably a win. Maybe Boise State. I might hope for that line to go up to 10 wins. I'm never uncomfortable at a reasonable price accepting a push. You want to win, but I'd rather play 10 at say minus 120 or something like that, rather than minus 190 at 9.5. So I bring the push into play, because this has a schedule where basically who's going to beat them besides Notre Dame. And by the way, Boise has a history. Look what they did last year at Oregon, nearly knocked off the Ducks and on the road. Who's to say they're not going to win at Notre Dame? I mean,
I say don't hand them the win. Don't hand Notre Dame the win, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, will they be competitive? I would think there's a real good chance, but I do not see any other losses on that team's schedule.
Yeah.
Greg, what do you feel, Greg?
Yeah, it's a disappointing top of the conference. We like the Mountain West. We look at it not just because of Boise, but usually there's some other good quality group of 5 teams. Yeah, and Fresno now has a new coach, and I think San Jose State could be interesting because at least a quarterback looked pretty good. Matter of fact, their quarterback threw for over 400 yards against Boise State last year, so he comes back. Dan Mullen's a nice story at UNLV, so that's going to be nice to follow. But he lost so much talent. It's going to be hard to think that they're going to be able to. This is UNLV. I think it's going to take them a little time, at least a year. And then the other team that I want to keep an eye on, the 2 teams I want to keep an eye on as possible, actually 3 teams as sleepers, because there's a lot of choices for sleepers here, would be Hawaii, San Diego State, and Wyoming. Wyoming, because I really like their quarterback, Anderson. I think he's the best quarterback they've had since Josh Allen. So and we know they're usually a good defensive team. So I think Wyoming could be interesting. San Diego State also. I like the fact they got a good quarterback this year, and that's been an issue for them in years past. And Lewis is a good coach. So, I think it's his 3rd year. And in Hawaii, they also have a better team than last year. They've got an NFL coach at defensive coordinator in his 2nd year. And that's the thing that Hawaii is not known for, is defense. And I think that defense is actually going to put them in a lot of games. So, so we all know Boise is going to win it. But if I'm looking at a team that might be able to come out and maybe surprise, I would take it between one of these 3 teams.
And by the way, we were talking before the show about the college games of the year that have been posted, and Westgate just put theirs out the other day on Wednesday, September 3rd. I guess so. That doesn't sound right, but it says September 3rd. UCLA at UNLV. UNLV that's got to be Saturday because it's they got a 9 a.m. start. UNLV a 1-point home favorite over UCLA, which of course longtime Pac-12 team, now in the Big Ten. Didn't have the greatest season last year, but again, there was last season had a lot of unknowns joining the conference, because first time around at a lot of the venues and getting to know the opponents. They hosted, of course, a few, and the travel and everything. But I think UCLA might be an improved team this year when we talk about we talked about the Big Ten, so we don't really know what they're going to be. But they should. A lot, but of the teams that struggled last year, moving across country like the Cals and the Stanford with all that travel, I would expect those teams to have better years this year simply because they're used to that travel going from West Coast to East Coast.
One team also I want to throw in here before we leave the conference is Air Force. They had one of those rare losing seasons last year. Troy Calhoun, very, very experienced coach, 19 years with this program, and he brings back 8 starters on offense. They're going to host Boise State, their 3rd game of the season here. And if there's an upset in the making early on in the month of September, it could be here. Boise State's got some bigger fish to fry, if you will. You mentioned Notre Dame, and they are a mission team. Air Force is. They won 29 games the previous 3 years. They won just 5 games last year. They got out to that rotten start last football season, but they closed with 4 straight wins and 5 straight point spread covers. What that says is the patient got healthy down the end of the stretch, and now he's going to begin the season with this large chip on his shoulder here. Look out for Boise State. Look out for Air Force.
My only concern about Air Force, and I guess it's the same with Navy and Army, and maybe Greg can talk about this. How involved are the service academies in the transfer portal, considering the academic requirements needed to get admitted to those academies?
Well, I don't think the transfer portal really comes into play for the service academies for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, Andy. They sort of stick to their guns, kind of use that word on purpose. They do what they do, and that's what helps band them together as teams. So I don't think we marked down in our preview guide magazine where each team ranked recruiting wise each of their previous 4 seasons. Okay. Last year, Air Force number 128 in the country in recruiting. The year before, when they had their down season last year, 129th, the year before 103rd, then 114th. It's not so much about who they recruit, or
that's excellent coaching.
Yeah, exactly.
For them to have the success they've had, that's excellent coaching. And you're talking about what, 19 years?
19 years, yeah. Well,
this guy probably could have had any number of
18 years. He's won 135 games.
Yeah, and Troy Calhoun doesn't normally have 2 losing seasons back to back.
No.
And he's usually at his best when everybody's kind of discounting Air Force and thinks, oh yeah, it's just another Air Force team. So I agree. I think Air Force is one of those. I think that's probably the perfect term, sleeper for Air Force, because don't go to sleep on Troy Calhoun and Air Force.
Yeah. One thing, Mark, about the scheduling dynamics involved here. Boise opens at South Florida, then they host Eastern Washington. Then they have the following week off to prepare for Air Force. And it might be a little bit more difficult for Air Force because as good as Boise State is, and as well as they may have flat spots, this is their first conference game of the year on the road. So they might not take Air Force as if they were playing, let's say they were 3-0 in conference play and then at Air Force, in the early part of November. So just something to be a little bit concerned of. But yeah, I could certainly see, if they played Air Force later in the year, I could see Air Force possibly pulling an upset. Not sure they can do it in September.
Yeah, the last 3 years they played Air Force, those games were all relatively close. They didn't play last year, but 3 years prior, they were all like 1-score games. Air Force won one of those games.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's wrap it up with the Sun Belt Conference, the Fun in the Sun Conference here, which seems to improve every year. It seems like every year a team really improves. I don't see a lot of regression to teams. Some teams were just flat out bad and still are flat out bad. Monroe, the Warhawks, teams like that. But we're seeing some improvement by these football programs here. James Madison came in and took the conference by storm, and they're going to be one of the co-favorites, I believe, to win the conference this year. James Madison is, along with Texas State. G.J. Kinney, the head coach, is one of my pet head coaches here. Andy, who are you seeing the favorite to win this? Is it Texas State or is it James Madison?
I'm showing now on the screen, Greg has up James Madison at plus 290. I have James Madison at plus 275 at the Westgate. Texas State and South Alabama and Louisiana on the screen, and Georgia Southern, 4 teams, still a distance behind. All are plus 700. I'm showing a little bit of a difference here, not all that much. I'm showing I'm showing Texas State second choice at plus 600, Louisiana plus 700 as the third choice, and South Alabama as fourth choice at plus 800. So those four teams at plus 7-1 are pretty much the same, just not separated by much. And then there's a small drop off to Georgia Southern, Old Dominion, and then everybody else is a little bit deeper. So James Madison remains the clear-cut favorite at plus 275 to win the conference. I'm showing alternate totals: 8 wins at minus 120 at Circa and at Westgate, 8.5, and the over 8.5 is even money. And we saw last year, even though Signetti left and went over and took all those players to Indiana, that James Madison still was a nice competitive program. Let me, in fact, get over to their page here. 9-4, which was a drop off from 11-2, but still a little bit better than their 8-3 record in their first year as the FBS team. So there's been a nice culture developed there for a number of years. The former assistant, I think it was, who came over, Chesney, who took over the head coaching job, did a fine job. They have a decent amount of returning talent and returning production for a team in a group of 5 conference, if you're ranking it nationally. On the top of what I'm showing, 55, I believe, for James Madison. And it's pretty, it's decent. It's a little bit better offense, not terrible on defense. So I still think this is the team to beat in the conference. Although with 4 teams so close behind in the overall odds, I wouldn't be surprised to see James Madison lose a couple of games. But if you play the over 8 or even over the 8.5 at plus 120, I think 9-3 or better is a reasonable expectation for this experience to the extent that they lost so much and still performed well last year. James Madison team.
Well, as far as Texas State is concerned, guys, and I'm talking about G.J. Kinney here, former quarterback himself. He's done a lot of really good things here. Under his lead, the Bobcats, since he's been there, their offense, in the 2 years he's been there, they've ranked number 5 overall and number 22 overall, and number 3 overall in scoring and number 20 overall in scoring. Teams are going to have a tough time if they want to get into a track meet with this football program here. It's exactly what Kinney does, having that quarterback mentality.
But look at the returning production.
Yes, slim
That's
and none. Okay,
both in terms of starters and production. That's a concern.
Yeah, that is huge, especially because the first 2 years he was able to bring in these transfer quarterbacks, these really big time quarterbacks, and now he doesn't have one. So I think that the odds here are correct. This is James Madison's conference to win, to lose, and then I also the other 2 teams that I actually prefer over Texas State are Georgia Southern and Old Dominion. Ricky Ronnie's done a really nice job with Old Dominion. I think they're due for like a really big breakout year, and I think this could be a good one. And Georgia Southern, French, their quarterback, good quarterback last year. They had a very competitive game early in the season against Boise State, and I like the direction they're heading. So keep an eye on both Georgia Southern and Old Dominion. I think one of those 2 teams might face James Madison in the Sun Belt Final.
Well, guys, that's a nice little review we did about the group of 5 conferences here on the show. I'm going to thank you guys and remind you.
We do it. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Two teams in the Pac-12, right, Greg?
That's it. That's right.
Oh, yeah. I forgot the Pac-12. My goodness.
Yes.
Yep. No respect.
West Coast bias.
Wasn't there some consideration at some point that Oregon State and Washington State would play each other twice in the regular season, but that ended up not working out? They were going to have home and home. Yes. And I think it's at Washington State this year, but that would have been interesting. I mean, there's no conference championship with 2 teams. Next year's going to be interesting when they get all those Mountain West teams in there, and I think one other program I think is coming in from outside.
Well, they're
boost up the Mountain West.
I'm sorry?
That'll boost up the Mountain West to make, even though it's the Pac-12, but that's basically what it will be. It'll be a glorified Mountain West.
Yeah,
it should be called Pac-12 Mountain.
Why not?
Well, if there's enough teams, they could go back to their divisions again. The Mountain.
They could go back to the old Pac-8.
Yeah.
Before Arizona State got in there 100 years ago.
But either of these teams, nothing's going to happen because, look, it's really a tough gig to take over at Oregon State. Trent Bray, nice defensive coordinator. But he's replacing a legend. And last year it was not a surprise that things didn't go well. I do like the fact they bring in this kid Murphy, the quarterback, who was on Texas, then went over to Duke. Now he's at Oregon State. So I think that's a plus. And maybe if they go back to playing good defense, they could be better than last year. But Washington State, they lose their head coach. And so they got a new head coach. But this head coach is interesting. It's the head coach at South Dakota State. So you've got one of those championship FCS level coaches now coaching Washington State. There's also the North Dakota State championship head coach who I think he was defensive coordinator or he was an assistant, I think at USC last year. He's now a head coach. I forget which team he's the head coach of, one of these group of 5 teams. So now these like 2 big FCS programs have both got their head coaches, championship head coaches in the FBS. And so Washington State does have that going for them. But yeah, they lost their quarterback. The quarterback Mateer went to Oklahoma. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So neither one of these teams are going to be, much special or really much to talk about this year.
I have to throw this out there though, guys. Oregon State is another one of these mission teams. Okay. Now the coach is gone. Everything's changing. Names and faces are changing and so forth and whatnot, but they snapped a bowling streak last year. So that could be some impetus for them this season. Andy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was going to say their win total, Oregon State, is 6.5 with the over -160. So they're saying 7-5 is a reasonable expectation. If you look at Oregon State's schedule, they play 7 home games this year. And of course, they're all non-conference games, although, what you want to call Washington State, which ends the season at Washington State. And it's actually, I believe it's a revenge game for.
Well, they're playing them twice
State
this year, Washington State.
I thought they were, but I'm only. Oh no, you know what they did? I mentioned that at the start, and I missed one in here. They are playing twice. They're playing at Oregon State November 1st and at Washington State on November 29th. So I was incorrect before, but still 7 home games and 5 road games. Road games will be tough for Oregon State at Texas Tech, at their rival Oregon. At a decent Appalachian State, at Tulsa, that could be a road win, and then the rematch at Washington State. Interestingly enough, Washington State, their win total is 5.5, and they are heavily juiced to the under 5.5, -150, +130 on the over. And the fact that these 2 teams play each other, I might actually look over the 5.5 on Washington State because they're going to get 2 opportunities, including the final game at home, which could be a significant game. Although there are some issues, as Greg mentioned, with Washington State. But looking at their home schedule, Idaho, Washington, their former rival, they have 6 road games. They host Toledo, Louisiana Tech, and then Oregon State at the end. But their road schedule. They don't play the greatest teams from non-conference play at Colorado State, at Ole Miss, and at Virginia. So that's a lot of traveling, and the only break they have is the Colorado State game. Then they have 2 weeks off to prepare for an Ole Miss team, which, Ole Miss is sort of rebuilding a little year with Jackson Dart gone. But Lane Kiffin, by the time we get to this game at Ole Miss for Washington State, will be the middle of October, and Ole Miss will be probably playing as well as it'll play all season by that point.
Well, I think there's total involved with Washington State. A lot of it has to do with losing John Mateer and this complete changeover of the team. They're 131st in the country in overall returning production. Yeah. They're just new building blocks going on at Washington State, and nobody knows what's going on with this puny 2 or what's going to end up happening with this conference. It's just a disgrace and egg on the face for the NCAA. But I'm glad to see that they're paired with Oregon State. They're still going to be playing football this year, and they're still considered a Division I or FBS program this football season here. So kudos to them for.
I hate the way the NCAA decided to deceive everybody and confuse everyone. What was wrong with 1A and 1AA? That's easy. FBS, FCS, you got to think. B stands for bowl, C stands for championship, and now the FBS has a championship game. So NCAA. Why don't you make it easy on everybody? Go back to the 1A and 1AA. It's a lot easier to understand the difference between those 2.
Because they're the NCAA, Andy.
Yeah.
By the way, next week, when we do all of our predictions, of course, if you've been with us the entire way, you've heard us talk consistently about whether or not we like this team or that team with the win totals. Next week will give us an opportunity to narrow it down to our best win total picks. So we can go through each conference when we do each conference, and maybe, we can come up with whatever we want. If you want to come up with like a top 3 win totals team per conference or whatever we want to do, that's what we'll do. So this way we'll let you know what our favorite win total teams per conference next week. Of course, with everything else that we're going to do next week when we give out all of our final predictions.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that show because that's what I love doing is zeroing in on teams that you think are maybe under the radar or possibly going to stumble. And we could talk a lot about those next week on the show. Guys, I want to thank you for doing the show. We did the group of 5 this week. We did a real nice job on the group of 5. You, Greg, Andy, and I will be back next week. Victor King will be joining us here shortly when NFL begins. I know the NFL preseason kicked off on Thursday. This is the day we're doing the show here. We'll see how that all shakes out, but it's warming up, guys, not only in Vegas, down here in South Florida, but
just remember 22-2, 22 work, 2 hours sleep.
22
that time of year.
That sounds like a sentence, Andy. 22.
Yeah, a prison sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, 22 years and a chance of 2 years.
Well, you talk about being in the dungeon, so maybe for the 22-2, maybe it is a sentence.
Yeah. 22-2. I don't play the lottery, but if my wife does, I'll tell her to look at those numbers. Hey guys, thanks for joining me on the show here. Andy Iskoe from thelogicalapproach.com in Las Vegas. Great job. Greg DePalma, our engineer extraordinaire from Primetime Sports. For Jim Feist, who's on hiatus, Victor King, also on hiatus. This is Mark Lawrence. Once again, remind you to always remember to bet with your head, not over it, and good luck as always.